as we start to turn our country back around.
Okay, as someone who wants to be as vice president, I think it's important that we speak about something that's in the news now. As you know, there is a sexual assault allegation against Joe Biden. The accuser, her name is Tara Reid, tells CNN that the alleged incident happened in 1993 while she was working as an aide in Biden's Senate office. She is claiming that she was delivering Biden a duffel bag and says that Biden had her up against the wall in a corridor on the Hill and violated her with his fingers. Now, CNN has now spoken on the record with her former neighbor, who says Reid told her about the allegation within a few years of the alleged incident. Biden's campaign says untrue, never happened. Is this a credible allegation?
I believe that women deserve to be heard, and I believe that they need to be listened to. But I also believe that those allegations have to be investigated by credible sources. The New York Times did a deep investigation, and they found that the accusation was not credible. I believe Joe Biden.
Hey, what's going on, fam? So another quick video. So that clip y'all just saw was of Stacy Abrams, a Democrat who ran for governor in Georgia, lying for Joe Biden. And basically what the backstory is that Joe Biden has been accused of sexual assault. A woman named Tara Reid has come out and said that when she worked for Joe Biden as a senator, he sexually harassed and assaulted her. Joe Biden has a history of being creepy with women, doing real suspect predatory things all up in their face, sniffing them, kissing them, rubbing on their backs, like in public. Like there's been several incidences on video where he was doing obviously awkward, borderline perverted behavior in public, and the women a lot of the times will look visibly uncomfortable. Sometimes they would be smiling along, but even then, sometimes people smile stuff off to cover up the fact that they're uncomfortable. But other women, they wasn't smiling at all. It was like clearly all over their face that they were uncomfortable, and you can easily find this on the internet or find videos mocking it. Even the Daily Show when Jon Stewart was the host, and that just shows you how long that has been going back. Even he did a montage, and I'm sure you can find that on YouTube or on the internet, of Joe Biden's creepy behavior. So this is very believable. In comparison to the Brett Kavanaugh accusations, which I don't really have a dog in that fight because that's, my main thing is worrying about white supremacy, obviously. But even with the Brett Kavanaugh accusations, this Tara Reid comparative to the Brett Kavanaugh, who was a Republican, Supreme Court nominee, and he's now on the Supreme Court, obviously. But at that time, when they were bringing out his sexual assault accusations to possibly keep him from being nominated to the Supreme Court, the accusers' stories were less corroborated than Tara Reid's story is. There weren't a lot of the people that Christine Blasey Ford claimed were there or were witnesses or that she told about the so-called sexual assault that she experienced from Brett Kavanaugh at the time. They contradicted her story. They either said, look, I was never there, I don't remember a party, or she never told me that. They would say one of those three things or all three of those things. Everyone who is asked about Tara Reid's story has corroborated that, yes, she told me at the time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That, yes, she worked for Joe Biden at the time. Like a lot of with the Brett Kavanaugh, they can't really even prove that these women ever knew or interacted with Brett Kavanaugh. It's undeniable that Tara Reid interacted with Joe Biden and worked for Joe Biden. So I don't want to get too much into the details of why her accusation is more credible. That's also a thing you can research on your own and see that Tara Reid's accusations are more credible. There's a lot of propaganda from the Democrats out there and the liberals claiming that her accusation is not credible. But if you look at either the non-biased news sources or even the conservative news sources, because even though they're biased, they're accurately reporting in this case. I'm actually going to use a conservative news source article in this video to describe or make my point. But anyway, long story short, you can easily look up plenty of non-biased articles that detail why Tara Reade's accusation is actually more credible than the accusations against Brett Kavanaugh. But the main reason why I want to talk about this, and obviously the title of the video, is when keeping it mammy, or when mammyism goes wrong, when keeping it mammy goes wrong, or when mammyism goes wrong. Stacy Abrams is a Democratic puppet who is out there to do the bidding of the Democrats, but obviously because she's quote unquote black, and she obviously is black. I'm saying she's quote unquote black, but obviously she's black. But obviously because she's a black woman, or a black woman in appearance, because I don't know if she's a black woman in her spirit, or obviously she's not a black woman in her spirit, but in her appearance, because she's a black woman, this is also somebody that black people are supposed to rally around and follow behind simply because of her melanin content. But Stacey Abrams' career is not going to be going so well going forward, because what she just did was she just boldly lied for her Democratic masters, her suspected white supremacist liberal masters, to protect Joe Biden, protecting zaddy Joe Biden. And how did white society thank her? They exposed her. She told a bold-faced lie, and they exposed her. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read an article from the Daily Wire, and I'm not going to read the whole article, fam. I'm just going to read parts of it, the most important parts that are relevant. And then I'm going to talk about it and talk about how she's destroyed her own credibility trying to be in service of white supremacy. So, again, from the Daily Wire, let me say this about the Daily Wire before I read the article. I know it's a conservative source. It's founded by Ben Shapiro, so anyone who wants to troll and tell me it's a conservative news article, I know. But anyone who believes that the liberal media is any less biased, look, I admit the conservative media is biased towards conservative ideals and the conservative point of view, and it's ran by suspected white supremacists, and the head suspected white supremacist over there is Ben Shapiro. However, if anyone thinks that the liberal Democrat media is any better than the conservative media, you might be too naive to even be on this channel. So go find something else to watch. Go watch the Young Turks or something. If you think that MSNBC or CNN is any less biased and also any less racist than the Republican conservative media. So if you will at least from time to time, you're willing to trust CNN and MSNBC when they tell you stuff, then you should also be willing from time to time to trust a conservative media source. Again, you have to have discretion. You have to understand white supremacy so you can understand when something's propaganda and when it's an agenda and when it's an actual piece of news. But I don't want to hear any moralizing about, oh, it's the Daily Wire. It's not trustworthy because it's the Daily Wire. Shut up. CNN is no more credible, unfortunately. But anyway, let's go ahead and read. And also, unfortunately, because CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, etc., they intentionally took over a month to even acknowledge these accusations. When in the same amount of time of the Brett Kavanaugh accusations coming out, they had covered that story 700 times. And they had covered this Tara Reade story 0 times in the same time frame. Up until now, they're finally starting to cover it because they can no longer deny it, because in white society, they're being exposed as biased. I'm talking about the CNNs and the MSNBCs and the New York Times and the Washington Post. The fact that they intentionally ignored this story, they're being exposed as biased, and they are supposed to come off or at least give the illusion of being unbiased. And the fact that the Joe Biden situation has pulled their mask off so blatantly, they've now been forced to cover the story. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the article. So again, from the Daily Wire, this is from, and it says, fact check. Did the New York Times say Tara Reade's accusation against Biden was not credible? And then it says, Democrat Stacey Abrams claimed during a CNN interview on Tuesday night that the New York Times conducted an investigation into Tara Reade, the former Biden staffer who has accused the Democratic presidential candidate of sexual assaulting her in 1993, and concluded that the accusation was not credible. And this is a quote from Stacy Abrams, obviously that clip y'all just saw. The New York Times did a deep investigation and they found that the investigation was not credible, Abrams claimed. I believe Joe Biden. I know Joe Biden and I think he's telling the truth, and this did not happen. So, did the New York Times, and this is the article continuing. So, did the New York Times conclude that that Reed's allegation against Biden was, quote, not credible? The answer is no. Abrams' remarks line up verbatim with talking points that were sent out to the Biden campaign to his top political supporters, stating that the New York Times has led to the truth. This incident did not happen. The New York Times released a statement on Thursday noting that they did not reach a conclusion on whether Reed's accusations were credible. BuzzFeed reported on the existence of talking points being circulated by the Biden campaign that inaccurately suggest a New York Times investigation found that Tara Reed's allegation did not happen. Our investigation, and this is the New York Times statement, by the way, our investigation made no conclusion either way. As BuzzFeed correctly reported, our story found 3 former Senate aides whom Reed said she complained to contemporaneously, all of whom either did not remember the incident or said that it did not happen. The story also included former interns who remembered Reed suddenly changing roles and no longer overseeing them, which took place during that same time period that Reed said she was abruptly reassigned. The Times also spoke to a friend who said Reed told her the details of the allegation at the time. Another friend and Reed's brother say she told them of a traumatic sexual incident involving Biden. And my bad, fam, that was an alarm going off. But anyway, so, and then just to finish up this article. So Politico reported this week, Stacey Abrams, a former Georgia lawmaker and unsuccessful candidate for governor, has been privately calling Democratic power brokers, asking them to tell Biden campaign officials she should be vice president, according to multiple labor leaders familiar with the discussions. Overt campaigning for the presidency has traditionally been frowned upon, weakening those who appear overly eager or insufficiently deferential to the nominee. And with the exception of Abrams, who said, I would be an excellent running mate, most top-shelf candidates this year have been guarded about their ambitions, even as they position themselves for a potential selection. And that's it for the article, fam. So as you can see, but this was triggered by Stacey Abrams' lie on CNN. It caused, because there was already reporting out there that the New York Times was coordinating with the Biden campaign, because what had happened was, even in that article that the New York Times released, that the Biden campaign and Stacey Abrams were claiming exonerated Biden from the charges, which was a lie. It was a bold-faced lie. That article had been edited because part of the article originally talked about all of Biden's creepy behavior and his history of public damn, excuse me for the cough, man. But all that video evidence of Biden's videotaped creepy behavior, that was referenced in the article. And there was a line along the lines of, this is not an exact quote, but along the lines of, the only evidence of Biden having any misconduct is when he's done these public displays of perverted, creepy behavior. And the Biden campaign called the New York Times and had them remove that line. Now, that's very problematic in a so-called unbiased media. Because when you have a political campaign or a politician or a former politician telling you and controlling what you put in the news and it's facts. Now, it's one thing if they tell you, hey, you need to take this lie out before I sue you for libel or whatever. That's one thing. That's different. Anybody can do that, whether they're a politician or not. They obviously have the right to call a news source and say, hey, that's completely untrue. Correct the record before I take legal action. That's one thing. It's another thing when somebody puts out something that's true and you're still able to contact them and tell them to take it out. That's where the American system becomes no different than what they accuse the Chinese of. They accuse the Chinese of controlling all the media and it all being propaganda and stuff. Places like North Korea, they accuse them and the government of completely controlling it, repressing the people, and there's no real free speech. And the media, it's all biased towards the government and everything is propaganda to promote the government. Well, the U.S. system becomes no different if the government and politicians can call the newspapers and call the media and say, hey, don't put this in even though it's true. Don't say this even though it's true. When they can say that to the media, we're no different than North Korea or what we accuse North Korea or China of being. We're no different. So even though that happened, and normally when in the U.S., when a newspaper or any media publication corrects an article, they usually have to put an editor's note for full transparency saying, hey, this is not the original version of the article. Here's why we corrected or removed something from the article or adjusted something or changed the wording of something. Because maybe they did accidentally truly misrepresent something, which does happen. Maybe they do make a mistake and they have to correct it, or sometimes they didn't make a mistake but they got called out, so they still have to correct it. But when it's actually a mistake, they put an editor's note. But in this case, when the Biden campaign called them and told them to remove that language about his history, they didn't put any editor's note. They just removed the line that the Biden campaign didn't like. So that was already out, even though the New York Times was trying to pretend like that didn't happen and were ignoring stories that were coming out that they did that edit. Once Joe Biden sent out his mammy, Stacy Abrams, to tell that lie, they had to turn on Joe Biden. And they had to put out that's what you heard me reading in the article. And you can find it if you still want to distrust the Daily Wire. You can find that statement from other news sources, even from liberal news sources, confirming that the New York Times threw Joe Biden's campaign under the bus. And look who's going to be the main sacrificial lamb for that. Stacey Abrams, who was desperate to be up under Joe Biden. You just heard me reading in the article how she's calling Joe Biden, campaigning to be vice president. She's not going to be vice president now. I'm 99% certain she will not be the candidate for Joe Biden for vice president. Because of the fact that she has this bold-faced lie out there and it can be easily used against her. And this is how mammyism goes wrong. You're so desperate to get your butter biscuits. You're so desperate to get more butter biscuits because Stacey Abrams is already a well-to-do woman based off her affiliation with the Democratic Party and her service to the Democratic Party. However, the butter biscuit she has is not enough. She has to have more butter biscuits, and she has to keep the butter biscuits that she has coming in already. She has to keep them coming in and showing that she's still worthy of her butter biscuits. So she has to put herself out there, tell bold-faced lies that are given to her by the Biden campaign, talking points that are given to her by the Biden campaign, that are bold-faced lies. And she's out here willing to sacrifice her credibility just to get the approval of the Democratic establishment and white zaddy. And now her credibility is severely damaged going forward. And fam, that's really it for this video. It's just driving home the point that when keeping it mammy goes wrong, when keeping it Jemima goes wrong. You up here lying for Joe Biden, and now your credibility is destroyed. Anybody who ever runs a political campaign against Stacey Abrams going forward, all they got to do is play that bold-faced lie clip and say, is this really someone you want to vote for? Is this really someone you want to entrust to follow through on their political promises when they're shown that they're willing to be such a bold-faced liar and a hypocrite? Because, by the way, Stacey Abrams was out here campaigning and caping for the Me Too movement, which has also been exposed as a complete hypocritical farce by this Tara Reade story. But I always knew, I've known for years it was a farce, because I know about the Bill Clinton allegations, and I was bringing that up on Twitter in 2016 when people were trying to cape for Hillary Clinton and whining about Donald Trump being a sexual predator. I'm like, well, if Hillary Clinton gets in the first man, her husband Bill Clinton, he's a sexual predator. Look up Juanita Broaddrick and other cases against Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton is a rapist. This is all over the Democratic Party. But this is a lesson to you other mammies or aspiring mammies and MBWs out there. And male Sambos and bedbugs and shines. This is a warning to you. White supremacy always breaks its tools, or will always sacrifice its tools whenever it feels like. So you can be snug, you can have you a good job and be all up in the clique with the suspected white supremacists, whether they're conservative or liberal suspected white supremacists. At any moment, whenever it's convenient for them, they will throw you under the bus or intentionally engineer your destruction, or a combination of both. When you mess up out there doing their bidding, they cut ties. They leave you hanging. You out of luck. Assisting white supremacy always backfires, either in the short term or the long term. Even if you as a Sambo die as a happy slave and you did your service and you got all your trinkets and rewards, they're going to go after your descendants. They're going to go after your children or your grandchildren. Somebody's going to pay, even though you were a dutiful servant to white supremacy. Somebody's going to pay. Somebody in your bloodline, somebody in your family, somebody who you were close to is going to pay for your service to white supremacy. It never, ever benefits you. But that's just food for thought, man. Fam. I said ma'am. Thinking about Stacey Abrams. But she's not a ma'am. She's a mammy. And that's what I was thinking about. But anyway, again, white supremacy, the lesson is white supremacy always breaks its tools. So anyway, fam, that's another video. Like, share, subscribe, and peace.